Hello friends, welcome here or welcome back. My name is Sarah and today you are joining me for my October reading wrap-up. Before we go any further, I would like to apologise for the state of my voice. I'm not sure how it's translating on camera. It's feeling quite good at the moment because of my tea and the remnants of a cough drop, but I am recovering from a cold at the moment, so I do apologise in advance and I hope you can forgive me if my voice sounds a little bit funny today. Nevertheless, October was a really good reading month for me and I'm really excited to share with you these 7 books that I managed to get through this month. So without further ado, let's begin. My first book for September is A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. This is a historical fantasy novel with a lovely ribbon of romance running the whole way through. We follow 2 characters, the first being Jack, who is a bard summoned back to his home island of Cadence, where the book takes place, and Adira, who is the heiress of the East on the same island. He returns to his home island to find out that young girls on the island are going missing. Now, the island itself is imbued with strong magic. There are elemental spirits and magic which is running rife on the island, and there is also a lot of political tension and strife with the opposing Western clan. And both Adira and Jack have to work together to try and find the missing girls before it's too late. This is so beautifully written. It has one of my absolute favourite tropes in it, which is enemies to lovers. Rebecca Ross has a really lyrical way of writing, and I think if you liked Uprooted by Naomi Novik or The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, I think you would also really like this. It's very heartwarming. There's a lot of complexity to the plot and to the landscape, and just the whole thing is just so well-rounded and intricately woven together. It's definitely one of my favourite fantasy books that I have read this year, and so I really am excited to read the sequel to this as well. So we are starting off strong for October. Okay, so second book of October is The Sisters of the Winterwood by Raina Rosner. This is a historical fantasy novel set on the border of Ukraine and Moldova, and in it we follow 2 sisters, Liba and Leia, who live in a community that is slowly coming under threat by multiple different people and sources. The book itself revolves around these 2 girls coming into their own magical abilities, which is based on them being able to transform into animals, one of them being a bear and one of them being a swan, which you can see actually on the front of this absolutely magnificent cover. Isn't that so gorgeous? Anyway, this is also a retelling of Christina Rossetti's poem Goblin Market. So with that, the historical aspects and all the different folkloric inspirations behind it, there is a lot going on in this story. This novel is about sisterly love and standing up for what you believe is right, and also embracing your destiny, and the whole thing is just laced with lots of magic as well. There's also a real focus on Jewish faith and the Jewish community throughout this, and as I said, also lots and lots of different folkloric influences too. It is marketed as an adult fantasy novel, however, based on the amount of angst and the fact that both of our protagonists are under the age of 18, I would recommend it to those of you who enjoy more young adult fantasy and fiction. Although there are elements of this that I found to be very repetitive at times, and you can see a little bit more about that in my reading vlog that I uploaded, I still thought that it was really unique and ambitious. I found it enjoyable, and I think overall I would give it 3 stars, and I'm certainly intrigued to read more from Raina Rosner in the future. So yeah, that's my thoughts on The Sisters of the Winterwood. The next book is How to Be Hopeful by Bernadette Russell. This is a well-being toolkit kind of book, all about how we can work together to create a more compassionate and kind world. A lot of the book were things that I think a lot of us would already be familiar with, but I really enjoyed all of her personal anecdotes throughout it, and anecdotes of people that she has kind of met along her journey and along the way. I specifically enjoyed a couple of sections. One of them was about the idea of gentle protest and using craft as a form of activism, and I thought that was really lovely and definitely gave me some stuff to think about. And I also really liked her approach to the environment and the climate crisis. I think this book would be really good if you are struggling with feeling really hopeless and feeling quite overwhelmed by the state of the world and not necessarily knowing active steps that you could be taking, because for all of the sections that she covers, she also includes kind of things that you can do to combat this or start making progress yourself, and that might be really, really helpful and lovely for some of you. It was a pleasant read, especially as an audiobook, but I wouldn't really say that it was life-changing for me. I also have a novel to talk about with you, and that is Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young. This was described to me as Gilmore Girls meets murder mystery with lots of magic, and after reading it, I can kind of see it. The book is set present day in a small town on a small island just off of Seattle. We follow Emery, who has lived on the island for her whole life, and years before this book starts, her best friend was found dead, potentially murdered in the woods. Her boyfriend at the time, August, was accused of the murder, and he kind of left the island under scrutiny with his mother. However, at the beginning of this book, he has now returned, and with his return, lots of secrets from the island are beginning to surface. This is a beautifully written and incredibly atmospheric read. I especially loved the multiple perspectives and how the island itself seems to be, imbued with magic and kind of has its own personality. I also think that how magic and family and kind of heritage is described is really lovely too. In a nutshell, this is a cosy small town murder mystery with really compelling and lovable characters set against a gorgeous, moody and magic infused landscape. And I would highly recommend this one. I gave it 4.5 stars. My next book for October is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This is a classic work of Gothic fiction, set kind of in part in Monte Carlo at the beginning, and then the rest of the book actually takes place in the English countryside. The narrator of this book is an unnamed young woman who is recently married to Mr. Maxim de Winter, whose previous wife, called Rebecca, died the year prior. This is a very interesting book in the fact that the plot itself is very tenuous. There isn't really a lot going on. This is really a story about a young woman feeling in competition with a deceased wife, but this really visceral and palpable tension is just extraordinary and just persists the whole way through the book. This is a book that has been on my TBR for I think nearly a decade, and so I was absolutely thrilled to get to it this year. I always love reading Gothic fiction in the autumn months, and even though this is set kind of during the summertime mostly and kind of throughout the year, as she gets used to her new role, as her new place as kind of a lady of the house, which is a very new role for her, I would also recommend reading this kind of when you're wanting some spooky vibes, which is for me in October. The protagonist is quite naive to begin with. I think she's 19 years old. She's very young, very impressionable, but you see her really start to understand how people can manipulate and judge other people. If you are looking for a really incredible historical Gothic novel, I would absolutely recommend this to you. The writing is just beautiful and really, I just loved everything about it, and I would highly recommend. Next up we have Bigger Than Us, The Power of Finding Meaning in a Messy World by Fern. This is a non-fiction book about the universe really and our place in it, and that very human desire to find out more and try and understand if and how and why there are forces at work that we don't understand. I'm not sure what I expected the book to be about initially. I think when I downloaded it as an audiobook, I was expecting it to be quite a run-of-the-mill, kind of well-being, quite comforting book really about kind of asking bigger questions. But it really is more of a book about spirituality. And all the forms that it can take. At times throughout this when I was reading it, it did sound a little bit woo-woo, if you know what I mean. Lots of kind of language around spirit and different energies and the universe, but I don't really mind that particularly, and I really enjoy learning about how different people engage with the world and different belief systems and such. And you know what, there were actually moments in the book that I found quite eye-opening, or that made me ask more questions. I'm not sure they were the questions that I was supposed to be asking, but they were there nonetheless. And Fern, the author, has a really engaging and accessible way of writing, and so listening to it as an audiobook it felt a bit like a cross between listening to a podcast and also having a chat with a friend, which was really lovely. So if you are into spirituality, or if like myself you're just quite intrigued by it, then definitely check it out and let me know what you think of it. Now, I'm finishing the video with the sequel to the first book that I mentioned in this video, and that is A Fire Endless by Rebecca Ross. Normally I would not be reading the blurb of a book in a video, because I feel like it's not really relaying my experience of the book. However, in this case, because it's a sequel, and not only that, but one that I recommended, I'm guessing about 10 minutes ago in this video, I'm reticent to share too much, especially plot-wise. So I'm going to read a couple of snippets from the blurb to give you a general idea. East and West, humans and spirits. The Isle of Cadence has always held itself and its residents in a delicate balance. But now, Bane, the spirit of the North Wind, has pushed everything off kilter in a bid to claim dominion over all. With the island falling further out of balance, humans and spirits alike will need to join together to face Bane. Yet no one can challenge the North Wind without paying a terrible price. Bane's defeat can only come through fire, song, and heart-rending sacrifice. I mean, even if you haven't read the first book, that sounds very intriguing and delicious to read, no? So anyway, plot-wise, that's all I'm going to say, and I think that's all that really needs to be said. But aside from that, this is another beautifully written, very lyrical book by Rebecca Ross. I absolutely loved this duology, and I think you can tell that by the fact that I've read both books in the space of a month. And yeah, the Elements of Cadence series is just so enchanting, and I really love it. I think it's only going to be a two-parter, but if she comes out with a third, I would love to read it. The Celtic inspirations, the depiction of kind of the spirit and the mortal realm, and just the way that the nature is depicted and the relationships between the characters and then between themselves and the search for identity is just stunning. And I truly think that this series is my favourite fantasy series I've read in 2023. So on that wonderful note, I am going to wrap this video up. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for bearing with my rather croaky and slightly temperamental voice in these last few clips. And let me know what you are reading and enjoying in the comments below. I would love to hear. I will see you next week with another video, but in the meantime, take care and goodbye.